All right, Sherwin joins us now for an update. So, Sherwin, we've finally arrived at the week when we'll find out who President Joe Biden's replacement in the White House is going to be. And despite what the polls are telling us, what's the mood, the sentiment, the feeling you're getting on the ground?
So let's forget about what the nominees or the candidates have been saying. Both campaigns are claiming that they are going to win this election. You heard Kamala Harris talking about the optimism and the momentum being on their side. Donald Trump for months has said that he's leading in all the polls and will win. But what do the tea leaves, Bongiwe, show us one day out from election day, right? What is the sentiment and the mood? And what we know at this moment is that near to 75 million people have already voted in early voting. And the demographic split is 54% women and 44% male. And that will give you some indication, given that the polling has consistently showed us that Kamala Harris will attract more of the female vote, given that reproductive rights, access to abortion, access to IVF is one of the top election issues that are driving voters to the polls. So she's getting a very healthy split in terms of women favor, the turnout from women, 54% to 44% male, given that the abortion issue is one of the main issues. Then we look at the betting platforms. Last week, the betting platforms were forecasting near 70% that Trump would win this election. Those numbers have since plummeted, near even, giving Kamala Harris and Donald Trump a near 50, just above 50% chance of winning. In fact, one of the betting platforms has Harris taking the lead. So what are we seeing in there? This is also about sentiment. This is not scientific, right? But there is sentiment saying that Harris is peaking at the right moment just ahead of Election Day, while Trump's numbers are falling. Cue the Des Moines Register state poll in the state of Iowa, done by a very respected pollster, J. Ann Seltzer. She is regarded as a gold standard pollster. And we haven't talked about Iowa in the sense of being a swing state, because Iowa voted for Donald Trump in 2016. It voted for Donald Trump in 2020. And what the polling in Iowa leading up to this election showed was that Donald Trump was going to win, except this new poll that dropped this weekend. This is what the pollster had to say about the data she's seeing, giving Kamala Harris a lead in the state of Iowa. Watch.
I was as shocked as just about anybody there. Our final poll before the election shows Kamala Harris winning 47 to 44 over former President Donald Trump. This is the first time that we've had Kamala Harris in the lead, so that by itself was a shock. We polled in September, and she had closed a gap from our previous poll when Joe Biden was on the ticket by 14 points. So Donald Trump had been leading by 18 points in June, and then Trump leading by just 4 points in September. So this is really almost a linear continuation of that trend, which had Kamala Harris leapfrogging over Trump into the lead.
And Bongiwe, what some of the data in that polling is showing us is the late surge from women voters in the state of Iowa. Some of those middle-of-the-road voters that hadn't made up their minds, women in particular, are going towards the Harris column in this election. And what does that portend, right? What does it tell us about some of the other swing states? Will women also show up in these last moments, these swing state voters? Are they going to fall into Harris's column, or are they going to fall into Trump's column? I will tell you this. One of Donald Trump's top surrogates just moments ago, Elon Musk, the South African-born billionaire, has just tweeted a graphic showing that split I told you in terms of the early voting. 54% women, 44% men, and his message to voters: men must vote. Men are absolutely critical for a Donald Trump victory in this election, and the numbers don't look good in terms of the early voting so far.
And Sherwin, give us a sense then of how the election night might unfold. I mean, Trump has already cast aspersions about the integrity of the poll, and I wonder how could that affect or even factor into how things may unfold in the days ahead, and when might we actually get the final result then?
And those, aspersions on election integrity really do matter in this conversation, right? If you look back at 2020, on the night that votes were still being counted, Donald Trump came out and announced that he had won the election without the final results having come through. And of course, the final decision only came on the Saturday when the state of Pennsylvania gave us their complete returns. And so there's a great deal of concern that Donald Trump, given the slow process that might unfold on election night, might come out and prematurely announce an election victory. The other thing that people should consider is you'll see the electronic results come in from different counties in different states, and so you can sort of get a sense early on who's leading, who's taking the lead, who's falling back. But what tends to happen with that is it's called the mirage effect. Essentially, you have smaller counties or smaller areas of a province or a state that is rural. Maybe there are fewer voters there, so it's easier for voting stations to count those ballots and send them to the centralized capturing center, which is probably in the state capital, because elections are run by the various secretaries of state in each state of the 50 states of the United States. So it creates a mirage, perhaps, that if Republicans are more favored in the rural areas, they tend to lead early on in the night, but then you get sort of a big dump from a city, for example, the swing state of Pennsylvania. What's the big city there? Philadelphia. So if Philadelphia comes back, big cities tend to favor Democrats, and so you'll get a lot of Democratic votes dumped into the tallies that really can reconfigure, the numbers as we see them. And so taking time to wait for the final result is very important, given the mirage effect that one might tend to see early numbers, favoring Republicans over Democrats. So wait until the end of the result. And so there's so many unknowns, given just the aspersions that Donald Trump has cast on this election. We know that teams of lawyers from both campaigns are staked out around various states around the country. So one expects there to be a number of legal challenges to processes, given the narrative that is emanating from the Trump campaign.
And, when you look at the violence and the aftermath of the last election, as you just mentioned, the images of January 6th still fresh in the minds of many. So what's the posture, though, from law enforcement this time around?
Look, if this election is going to be close, it's going to create heightened tensions. There's a great sense of anxiety already. And of course, January 6th is still front of mind for so many people, given the violence we saw in the aftermath of Joe Biden's victory against Donald Trump and his lack of acceptance, right? He didn't even concede the election. So one expects a different version of that this time around based on what the Trump campaign is saying. We have already seen states like Washington State out west, Nevada, already activate the National Guard to be on standby in case, things go a little awry on election night. But that's really going to depend on what the results look like. Is it going to be a close race? Could it be a clean sweep, right? We don't often talk about the margin of error in these polls. The margin of error in the polling shows us between a 2 and 5% margin of error. Does that margin of error, Bongiwe, favor one candidate or one nominee over the other? And can that margin of error be consistently for one candidate or the other on election night? Because what that would tell us is that we could have an early election night. You could maybe have a clean sweep of some of the swing states by one or either candidate. That'll settle nerves a little bit if the numbers are overwhelming in favor of one nominee. But if the polls are accurate and this goes down to the wire, I don't know, buckle up.
Buckle up indeed. Sherwin, thank you very much for that update. That's Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News correspondent. Remember, we do have that special elections broadcast tomorrow, and we will be, of course, looking at all the swing states, all the developments around this particular story.